Good afternoon. It's Monday, March 16th. I'm Ariel O'Sullivan, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. With 15 hours to go until the polls open, candidates were scrambling across the country, appealing for everyone to go to the polling station and vote for them. IBA's Eli Wogelanter brings us this report.
Tens of thousands of demonstrators overflowed Tel Aviv's Rabin Square last night to support a right-wing government in a rally titled United for the Land of Israel. In a last-ditch bid to overtake the Zionist Union and seeking to siphon votes away from rivals, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu appealed to right-wing voters to convince them to back Likud rather than smaller parties like Bayit Yehudi and Kulanu. He slammed his main rivals at the head of Zionist Union, Isaac Herzog and Tzipi Livni, saying that as opposed to them, he will offer no concessions to the Palestinians, no withdrawals, and will not divide Jerusalem. And he warned that the gap between Zionist Union and Likud votes will determine who forms the next government. If we don't close this gap, there is a real danger that a left-wing government will rise to power, Netanyahu said. His comments were part of his media blitz over the last few days, explaining that his position is in jeopardy, as he told Arutz Sheva.
Not only my position, the position of the national camp. The possibility is that if we don't close the gap between Labour and Likud, then Bougie and Tzipi Livni will form a government, a left government, backed by the Arabs, that will retreat along all fronts. They'll go back to the 67 lines, they'll divide Jerusalem, they'll agree to this horrendous deal that is being hatched up that will enable Iran to go to the bomb. I think there's a real danger for the state of Israel and the land of Israel.
Taking the stage after Netanyahu was Economy Minister Naftali Bennett. Earlier yesterday, Central Elections Committee Chairman Justice Salim Jubran rejected a merits attempt to have an injunction issued to stop the rally. But Jubran did declare the gathering a political event and said local councils in the West Bank cannot contribute government funds towards the rally. He also banned singers from performing because having a free performance by an artist is specifically mentioned by law as an illegal campaign gift. Bennett noted that the Elections Committee banned artists and songs, but said, "We will not be silenced, we will not stop singing." He then belted out Jerusalem of Gold, accompanied on his own guitar, as the crowd sang along. Zionist Union co-leader Yitzhak Herzog paid a visit yesterday to the Western Wall, where he read several portions of Psalms and placed a note in one of the cracks, presumably asking God for assistance in tomorrow's elections. Herzog told reporters that he would ensure that the Kotel remained in Israeli hands, saying, "My family has been tied with strong bonds to Jerusalem for generations. I am among those who daily pray, and to Jerusalem, your city, return with mercy. And I will ensure the strength and stability of Jerusalem and its residents with actions, not just words, more than any other leader." Yeshua Beitenu chairman Avigdor Lieberman predicted that his party would win at least 10 seats tomorrow, even though the latest polls showed his party just scraping past the electoral threshold with 5 seats at most. While on a visit to Hebron, Lieberman painted himself as the true leader of the right-wing camp, and not Netanyahu, telling reporters that he never gave away Hebron and that his party in 2004 voted against disengagement from Gaza. One of the parties under attack from both sides is Yesh Atid. Fearing that Yair Lapid may steal his votes, Herzog attacked the centrist party today, saying votes for Yesh Atid are liable to be those that will help Netanyahu. Lapid has not ruled out participation in either a Likud or Zionist Union-led coalition. Yesh Atid is hoping to attract Israel's floating voters to match the party's results in the previous election, where it gained a surprising 19 Knesset seats. One thing all candidates agree on after 3 months of hard campaigning is that they are all exhausted.
Exhausted but excited, enthusiastic, exhilarated. You work hard for 3 months and you come to the voters with everything you've accomplished in a year and 8 months and what's on the table in these elections. There's a feeling of pride and confidence because people are intelligent and people know that they want to put people into office who have done and who will do. And because of that, in Yesh Atid, we are very confident people will give us their support, but we will work all the way until the last moment.
Eli Wogelanter, IBA News.
Nationwide elections start tomorrow with millions of Israelis preparing to cast their votes and have their say in who will form the next government. IBA's Margot Dudkevich looks into the voting procedures ahead of tomorrow's election day.
The countdown is on with more than 5,883,000 eligible voters poised to cast their ballots, choosing from 25 parties running in the 20th Knesset elections. With warm weather forecasted, Members of the public are expected to use their day off before or after voting, touring the country, lying in the sun at the beach, or taking advantage of the numerous sales on offer in stores across Israel. 11,000 polling booths, including 2,500 accessible for people with mobile disabilities, will open at 7 tomorrow morning and shut down at 10 at night. Voters can cast their ballots without the voting card received in the mail if they know which polling booth they can vote at and have with them an identity card, passport or driver's license. Members of the public who are not sure which polling booth to vote at can call the Elections Committee on a toll-free number that will be printed in all the local newspapers tomorrow. Contact the committee on its website or send an SMS message via their mobile phone to 052 9999 555 and receive the address of the polling station. To ensure votes are not tampered with, a committee representative along with 3 other people will man each polling station. At the end of the voting period, adhering to a strict protocol, they will count the number of ballots and compare it to the number of registered voters who casted their ballots. The findings will be registered and the ballots placed in a sealed box and sent to the Central Elections Committee, where they'll be counted a second time. By Wednesday morning, the Central Elections Committee will have counted 95% of the votes, and by Thursday afternoon, the committee is expected to publish the final results, including the number of mandates received by each party. With exit polls expected to be broadcasted by local television stations shortly after the polling booths close, the public is likely to receive an inkling of which party appears to have won the most mandates close to midnight. However, only after the counting ends will the arduous procedure of forming the next coalition begin. Margot Dudkevich, IBA News.
Well, joining us now is Hebrew University political science professor Avram Diskin. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So, Professor Diskin, you've witnessed many elections in Israel. How would you sum up this campaign?
Well, I think it's more tense than in previous cases because it's not really very clear who is going to be the next prime minister. We had surprises before. The first big surprise, of course, 1977. It still looks as if Netanyahu has better chances, although his party might come second, and that is because although there is no majority to all the right-wing parties combined, it would be very difficult for Herzog to form a coalition.
Let me ask you about that, but you talked about surprises. What are going to be the surprises of this election?
First of all, I have to say that in all previous elections, the actual results were very different, I would say, than what was predicted by the public opinion surveys. Everybody remembers, for instance, Yesh Atid getting 19, although in the last 15 public opinion surveys or so, it never got more than 11. The Likud in the last the Likud Beitenu, Lieberman and Netanyahu together, never got less than 32 seats during the whole campaign, the last 50 public opinion polls or so, and finally got only 31, and there are many, many such examples. So we really don't know what's going to happen.
We have any suspects, who could be the surprise? Could it be Kahlon? Could it be the Green Leaf Party?
First of all, I don't believe the Green Leaf will probably do the best out of the small parties who are not really competing to meet the 3.25 threshold. But what we have is really something which is sensed as a very, very close race. And usually when we have something like that, first of all, we have a relatively high turnout, which I do expect this time. And many times in other countries, and also in Israel, when you have a close race, and that is really the feeling of people, people move back to the two large parties. The greatest surprise, of course, was in 1981, when the two large parties combined got 95 seats of the Knesset. Maybe they'll get together, that amount of seats. We're not going to have such a surprise, but it could go that way.
When the Prime Minister declared elections 3 months ago, he seemed like to be a shoo-in. He was looking for a way to form his own sort of coalition, and it was sort of riding high in the polls. But now it looks like that he may not be the winner, and maybe the Zionist Union will be the winner. Did the Prime Minister make a mistake?
I think that I believe the Prime Minister that the main reason for calling the new elections was that he felt he cannot go on any longer because his political power within the government was equal to that of Lapid, to that of Bennett, and to that of Lieberman. And each of them had very difficult demands and was not ready to compromise. Also, he suspected that they organized some kind of a putsch against him to overthrow him. I don't know if that is correct, but anyway, the government was paralyzed. You know, if I was in his position, I would have probably tried to pass the budget anyway, even he didn't like, you know, some elements in the budget. And then, you know, you have by far more power. But he decided to take the gamble. He didn't want, you know, a budget which was not according to his preferences. And I think that he was really pushed to that move.
You talked about coalitions. Do you think there's a possibility of a sort of a national coalition between the Likud and the Zionist Union?
This is always a possibility, especially given the arithmetics of the post-election situation, and we don't know the situation yet. But what we have today is really an animosity that grew up between the two large parties. Also, we had in the Zionist camp, in spite of its name, quite a number of representatives, of future representatives, who are very extreme to the left on many, many issues. And that will make it more difficult. So it's less likely than before. So on the one hand, you have the problems of forming a coalition. You know, it's difficult to form it unless you depend, once again, on very small parties. On the other hand, there is the gap between the two large parties. And I know that the president supports it, but that doesn't really matter. You know, we'll have to wait and see about that.
What would you say are the likely coalitions?
I still believe, you know, a lot of things depend on Kahlon. If what we saw during the whole campaign, and that is that all the right-wing parties, meaning the Likud, Lieberman, Bennett, and the three Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox parties don't have a majority, and I expect that to happen, then you have Kahlon closer to Likud than any other party, including Yesh Atid. And then it's really his decision. So he was already guaranteed to have the senior position, the finance ministry that he wanted. It's not only, you know, an empty promise because it was made public on all channels of TV, etc. So it really depends on him. So if he goes in that direction, I think still the most chances means 40% of the chances is that we are going to have a right-wing government with Kahlon and all the right-wing parties, but other possibilities are still open.
Still, if it is a Zionist Union government, do you think that Israel's image would change around the world?
I definitely think so, and I regret that, by the way, because, you know, in the world, Israel is perceived as the party responsible for the fact that we don't have a peace agreement. I don't think that this is correct. I'm not saying that, you know, everything that the right-wingers support is perfect, but, you know, the real obstacle is really on the Palestinian side. However, the image is, in the world, is that Netanyahu is an extreme right-winger, and that Israel is responsible. And the image of Herzog and Tzipi Livni is much better. So I think it will change the image of Israel. It will not bring a peace agreement, unfortunately. Okay. I do support, you know, major compromises, the establishment of Palestinian state, but I'm not a great believer in the possibility of real peace.
Professor Avram Diskin of Hebrew University, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
The 2015 election campaign was largely dominated by the social media. That's the view of social media marketing expert Ari Gottsman, who says that the electronic media is especially important in reaching the undecided voters.
Smartphones and broadband access are ubiquitous today in Israel. Everybody has one. Everybody's in front of a digital screen 24/7, meaning you can reach out to somebody and you can get in front of them at almost any point in time. And if you're not there with video and with content that's strong and that evokes an emotional response from people, you're missing out. The content that they're using today in the elections is not talking about slogans as much as it used to. It's more cute, it's more funny, it's more emotional, and it's more engaging with the average voter. And he sees it and he smiles. Getting people to smile, touching their hearts, that's what's going to make them change their minds. In the 2013 elections, 15% of the population was up for grabs. This year, that number has increased to over 21%, which means we have a lot more sway votes out there. Social media is the best way to digitally influence people in their homes, in front of their computers, or in front of their mobile phones.
Well, now this announcement from the Central Elections Committee for the 20th Knesset. On Election Day, Tuesday, March 17th, voters must present one of the following identification documents to the polling station committees: an Israeli identification card, a driver's license, or a valid Israeli passport. It is not obligatory to present an Israeli ID appendage, nor is it necessary to show the notice to the voter card that you should have received in the mail. The notice stipulates the location of your polling station as well as your serial number at that polling station, and therefore it is recommended to bring it together with you or your identification card. If you did not receive your notice to the voter and do not know where to vote, contact the Central Election Committee telephone information centers. The phone numbers are posted on notice boards in every community, published in daily newspapers, and listed on the Central Election Committee website, www.bechirot.gov.il. And as part of our election coverage, tomorrow, March 17th, in addition to our daily news at 4, IBA English News will bring you a special election night broadcast at 11:30 p.m. with all the results. Our reporting staff will be deployed at all the leading party headquarters with up-to-minute results. That's tomorrow night at 11:30. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and his Iranian counterpart Mohammad Zarif today resumed nuclear talks in Lausanne, Switzerland, in an attempt to narrow the gaps before the March 31st deadline for an agreement. The meeting includes U.S. Secretary of Energy Ernest Moniz and Iran's nuclear chief Ali Akbar Salahi. Talks are focused on technical details and how to curb Iran's nuclear program. Kerry is urging Iran to make concessions that would allow the six world powers to reach a political framework to reach an agreement for a nuclear deal that Tehran would lift sanctions in exchange for curbs on Tehran's nuclear program. The parties have set the June 30th deadline to finalize an accord. Iran and major powers will meet later this week in Lausanne, and a date has yet to be announced. It's been exactly 4 years and some 300,000 deaths since the outbreak of the Syrian civil war. U.S. Secretary of State Kerry raised eyebrows when, instead of calling for Assad's removal, he told CBS News Face the Nation that the U.S. will have to negotiate with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad for a political transition in Syria. Kerry also said that the U.S. is exploring ways to pressure Assad into agreeing to talks.
We are working very hard with other interested parties to see if we can reignite a diplomatic outcome. Why? Because everybody agrees there is no military solution. There is only a political solution. But to get the Assad regime to negotiate, we're going to have to make it clear to him that there is a determination by everybody to seek that political outcome and change his calculation about negotiating. That's underway right now. And I am convinced that with the efforts of our allies and others, there will be increased pressure on Assad.
And you'd be willing to negotiate with him?
Well, we have to negotiate in the end.
In Washington, hundreds of protesters gathered outside the White House to oppose the Syrian policy of the Obama administration. As the war in Syria enters its 5th year, protesters expressed their disagreement with the new political shift in U.S. policy. Washington has long insisted that Assad be replaced through a negotiated political transition, but the rise of the common enemy in the form of the Islamic State appears to have softened Washington's resolve to remove Assad from power.
I think what makes me angry right now is U.S. policy in Syria. Our president has decided that a war criminal like Assad can continue to torture, kill, destroy the country with no consequences whatsoever. It's almost like in order to get the treaty with Iran, he's decided to make Syria the sacrificial lamb.
Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair is expected to resign shortly from his position as envoy for the Middle East Quartet. Blair met with U.S. Secretary of State Kerry over the weekend and reportedly informed him of his decision. He also spoke with EU Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini, and Blair told the UK-based Financial Times Daily that after 8 years in service, he wants to find a new role for himself in the Middle East peace process. Last year, several former British ambassadors called for Blair's dismissal due to what they termed as a conflict of interest caused by his extensive business activities. At the time, Blair dismissed the criticism. And Russian President Vladimir Putin made a public appearance today, ending 11 days of rumors about his whereabouts. 62-year-old Putin has last been seen in public on March 5th, fueling speculation that he had fallen ill, visited Switzerland to see his mistress, died, or was overthrown in a military coup. Putin this morning was seen in the city of St. Petersburg meeting the president of Kyrgyzstan. Asked by reporters to comment on the media speculations, Putin said simply, "Life would be boring without gossip." Stock talk now, and the local finance share prices on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange rose slightly, and the shekel today put in a mixed performance. Here's a look at the mid-afternoon numbers. Turning to the weather, and the forecast is for warmer temperatures, and it'll be a beautiful day to vote and even get out to nature. Here's a look at the expected highs and lows at home and abroad for the next 24 hours. Well, thank you for being with us this afternoon. And this program reminder before leaving you, in addition to our daily news at 4, IBA English News will bring you a special election night broadcast tomorrow night at 11:30 p.m. with all of the early results. Please tune in. Aaron Viner will be here tomorrow at the same time, same channel. Until then, I'm Ariel O'Sullivan wishing you a good evening and shalom from Jerusalem.